The police suddenly said, "We've quickly taken a child found in the car to the hospital. You're under arrest." I was shocked when they showed up at my house and couldn't believe what they were saying. "What? I don't have a child," I replied, confused. The officer looked confused too. They said they found the car's owner through the license plate and it was registered in my name. Could this be true? I had a feeling, so I rushed to the hospital where the child was taken. There, I saw a boy about 5 years old lying on an emergency bed. His face was red and rough, but my heart raced when I saw his familiar face. From that moment, my life changed completely with this child at the center. I am Emily, a 33-year-old who works from home. I started dating my husband, Michael, when we were in college together in the same club, and we got married after graduation. We've been married for 10 years but couldn't have children. We even tried fertility treatments, but I found out I had a condition that made it hard to conceive. Michael, being kind-hearted, told me, "It's okay. Let's live happily, just the two of us." My in-laws are nice, and since my brother-in-law already had a child, they never pressured me. But I felt bad for my parents, who were hoping for grandchildren. I live near them and visit often. If only my brother John had a child. I have a younger brother, John, who is 7 years younger than me. Maybe because he was the youngest, he started hanging out with bad influences in middle school. He says it's because our parents compared him to me, the smarter and more accomplished older sister. But from my perspective, our parents treated us equally. Still, John rebelled and caused a lot of trouble. At 20, he said he was cutting ties with the family and left home, disappearing without a trace. I haven't seen him since then. Sometimes I look through old photo albums and remember the days when John, as a toddler, would follow me around, calling me sis. One day, while I was working from home, my doorbell rang nonstop. I panicked and checked the camera, seeing the police at my door. They suddenly announced, "We've transported a child found in a car. You're under arrest." I was shocked and speechless. "What? I don't have a child," I said. The officer looked just as confused. I had so many questions. The police explained that a passerby had noticed a car abandoned on the road with a limp child inside and reported it. The child was taken by ambulance to the emergency room. When I asked where the car was, they said it was in front of my parents' house. Unfortunately, my parents were away on a trip. The police identified the car's owner from the license plate. While the car was registered in my name, the person using it was my younger brother, John. I used to lend my car to John when he got his license, and he took it when he left home. Since then, the car has been left in front of my parents' house only when it needed inspection and maintenance. Despite scolding him, my parents felt sorry for John and took care of the car, thinking he might need it. But who was the child left behind in the car? Hurrying to the hospital, I approached the bed in the emergency room and saw just the top of a small head peeking out from a blanket. The curly, wavy hair instantly reminded me of someone. My heart raced as a childhood memory of John flashed before my eyes. Getting closer, I saw the face of a boy around 4 to 5 years old who looked strikingly like John. Could it be? Just then, I received a phone call from my mother, who was away and sounded panicked. John called and asked me to take care of his child. He said he left the child in the car because we were not home. Under this blazing sun, what should we do? I reassured my worried mother that the child had already been taken to the hospital and seemed likely to survive. She sounded relieved and said she would be back soon. I understood my mother's feelings. There was no time for a trip now. I knew this child was my brother's. But when was he born, and who is his mother? I explained to the police that he was probably my brother's child and decided to stay with the boy. After that, I tried calling my brother several times, but couldn't reach him. Looking at the child, he seemed to be in pain. Seeing such a small body enduring so much hurt broke my heart. At that moment, a nurse came and handed me the clothes the child had been wearing before changing into hospital pajamas. They were worn out and very dirty, with the name Tom written on the tag. From his extreme thinness and the state of his clothes, it was clear that Tom had been living in a very tough situation. That evening, my mother returned from her trip and rushed to the hospital. "John," she murmured, holding Tom tightly with tears in her eyes. Tom looked a lot like John. By the next day, Tom's condition had improved, but he seemed very scared. I gently asked him, trying not to scare him, "How old are you, Tom?" "I'm 5 years old," he replied, holding out one hand and counting his fingers. "Wow, you speak so clearly." I praised him and stroked his head. and he smiled for the first time. Still, Tom seemed thin, pale, and small. The doctor said he had bruises all over his body. I convinced the police to let us take care of Tom until we could reach John, and somehow managed to avoid filing an official report. 3 days later, Tom was ready to leave the hospital. I didn't want him wearing his old ragged clothes, so I bought him new ones and dressed him in them. He looked even smarter and cuter in his fresh outfit. As we were leaving the hospital, I finally managed to get through to John on the phone, but there was a lot of noise on the other end. How could you leave him in the car under the blazing sun? He ended up in the hospital, I shouted in frustration. He survived, didn't he? So it's fine, John replied casually. He had bruises all over his body. Did you do this? I demanded. Thomas is clumsy. I was just teaching him discipline, John retorted, showing no remorse. I was speechless. He's only 5 years old. He's struggling. He can't even remember his letters no matter how many times I try to teach him. It's frustrating, so I left him at our parents' house. I was shocked by my brother's harsh words about his own son. Considering it might be best for Tom not to be with such a parent, I was even more appalled when John added, "I'm in the middle of a casino jackpot right now," and abruptly hung up the phone. Seeing Tom, who looked visibly worried, begin to silently shed tears, I gently said, "It's going to be okay," and comforted him by stroking his head. At 5 years old, it's natural to feel scared and cry, but he didn't seem to be asking for his dad or mom, which struck me as unusual. I couldn't help but wonder why, and it pained my heart. After discussing with Michael and my parents, we decided that Tom would stay with us at our home. At home, I prepared a kid-friendly lunch with hamburgers and fries, adorned with colorful character flags. When I set the plate in front of Tom, his eyes lit up. "I've never seen food like this before. Can I really eat it?" he asked. "Of course, Tom. I made it just for you," I assured him. I loved watching him eat, with ketchup all over his mouth and a big, crunchy smile. In the evening, Tom had a blast playing in the bath with Michael, laughing and having a great time. At bedtime, I'd read him picture books while lying next to him. He listened attentively with sparkling eyes, but sometimes he'd look at me with a worried look. "Can I stay here forever? I don't want to go back home anymore," he pleaded one night. "I understand. You want to stay here with us, right?" I asked gently. Tom nodded with relief, and it broke my heart to see him feeling that way. As the days passed, he grew even closer to me and Michael. He'd offer to help fold laundry or try to carry my shopping bags with his little body when we went out. Living together, I discovered what a kind and wonderful child Tom was. Michael and I grew very attached to him, and we began discussing the possibility of adopting him, especially if John and his partner weren't planning to raise him. When I checked with the city office, I learned that my brother and his wife had registered Tom's birth, and according to their address records, they were living with Tom at our parents' house. We started the process of consulting with family court about adoption. About a month after Tom came to live with us, John and a young woman came to visit. "Hey, thanks for taking care of Tom, lol," John said casually. "I don't want to go back," Tom whispered, quickly hiding behind me. He must have had some frightening experiences. It had been years since I'd seen my brother, and he looked more confrontational than ever, with disheveled clothes. The young woman with him, who introduced herself as Riza, had multiple piercings in her ears and nose and dressed flamboyantly. "How did you find out where I live?" I asked, puzzled. "Mom told me. By the way, sis, you're living in a nice house and having a great life, huh?" "I have something to discuss about Tom." "Let me in," John said. I felt uneasy, but I couldn't refuse when it was about Tom. According to my brother, he had married this woman shortly after leaving home. They had been moving around a lot, and there were times when they lived in their car because they had nowhere else to go. While he looked around my house, my brother suddenly got to the point. "I heard from Mom that you don't have any children, right? You've been married for 10 years with no kids, so maybe you can't have any," he said. "What are you trying to say?" I asked, feeling a sense of foreboding. "We have a great idea. If you want Tom, how about it? But it won't be for free," he said bluntly. I was shocked by John's audacity, trying to sell his own son for money after previously trying to leave him with our parents out of annoyance. I was filled with anger. "John, do you realize what you're saying? Tom is not some object to be sold." "What?" acting all righteous now. I rebelled because of your seriousness. Our parents always favored you, John sneered. It's ridiculous to blame our parents and me for your own choices. Shut up. Just give me the money, John demanded, raising his hand as if to strike me. In that moment, Tom, who had been hiding behind me, stepped forward. He stretched out his arms, trying to shield me from John. Seeing this, I felt even more determined to protect Tom. John, selling your own child for money is absolutely wrong, I stated firmly. Despite my initial outrage, I decided to give them the $13,400 I had saved in my dresser as a settlement. I also had them sign an agreement that they would have no further involvement with Tom and obtained their consent for the adoption. John's wife callously remarked, "It's a relief not to have to deal with such a troublesome child," shocking me with her indifference. Once the paperwork was finalized, they took the money, smirked, and vanished. From that moment on, Tom truly became our son, and we completed all the necessary legal procedures. The days that followed were filled with happiness. Tom thrived and grew healthy, and as a couple, we found our lives enriched with smiles and joy thanks to him. During this time, we began to notice Tom's talents and were eager to nurture them. However, 15 years later, another incident unfolded when my younger brother and his wife paid us a visit. John now sported a scruffy beard, messy hair, and looked much older than his 41 years. His wife appeared disheveled, with no makeup, wearing dirty clothes and torn plastic sandals. It was clear they were going through tough times and living a rough life. I had a sinking feeling because their visit couldn't bring anything positive, and unfortunately, my dependable husband Michael was at work that day. "What brings you here?" I asked cautiously. "I need some money," John replied bluntly. "Why should I give you any money?" I countered, feeling uneasy. "I'm surprised. I thought Tom was just a dumb kid, but he got into a top medical school, didn't he?" John said, revealing he had heard about Tom through someone in our neighborhood at a local tavern. In reality, Tom was very bright. He had excelled in school since elementary years and earned admission to a prestigious medical program right after high school. "That's no longer your concern," I said firmly. "It's a big deal. He's my son. And since he turns out to be such a great kid, I thought I'd take him back," John stated. "What?" I exclaimed, shocked by his audacity. "If you don't like it, how about you give me $33,500, John suggested. "Didn't I already give you $13,400 15 years ago?" I countered. "That's a different situation," John insisted. "I can't give you that much money," I firmly refused. John grabbed my collar and threatened me, asking if I wanted to get hurt. It hurt more emotionally than physically, seeing my brother act this way. Just then, someone shouted, "Stop it," and grabbed John's arm. It was Tom, now a strong 20-year-old. Tom easily subdued John, who ended up lying face down on the floor. My brother's wife, seeing Tom all grown up, said warmly, "You've grown so much. I'm your mom. I've wanted to see you." But Tom stood firm, declaring, "My only parents are the mom and dad of this house. I remember the terrible things you did to me when I was just 5. I felt love for the first time when I came here. You are not my parents." Even after Tom's heartfelt words, John and his wife didn't seem ready to give up. So I showed them the agreement we had made 15 years ago. It clearly stated, "We will have no future involvement with the child. If we fail to comply, legal action will be taken. You've broken your promise. I'm calling the police," I stated firmly. They looked visibly shaken, trying to make excuses that they had forgotten about the agreement. In reality, we're being chased by debt collectors. Without $33,500, we're in serious trouble. Please don't be so heartless. Help me out, sis. You're well off, right? John pleaded. Despite his earlier threats, now he was begging. "I can't help you. The moment you abandoned Tom, you lost any connection with me as well. You're no longer my brother," I said firmly. "Please," John begged, desperate and defeated. I firmly rejected John's pleas. Helping him would only enable his behavior to persist. As their insistence continued, I was on the verge of calling the police when they reluctantly left. Later, I learned that the couple had been arrested for shoplifting and were now leading a troubled life in jail. Meanwhile, Michael, Tom, and I continued to live peacefully and happily. Seeing Tom's determination to become a doctor and help those in need fills my heart with joy. Thanks to Tom, our days are filled with laughter and contentment. We look forward to continuing our happy life together.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.